She played a nun on screen, but when the U.S. Senate discovered America's saint was pregnant with another man's child while still married, they condemned her as an apostle of degradation, and she was exiled for 7 years. Her scandal was just one of 15 secret Hollywood wars that destroyed the studio system and created every freedom actors have today. Ingrid Bergman, exiled for love. Ingrid Bergman stood before American audiences in 1945 as the embodiment of virtue itself. As Sister Mary Benedict in The Bells of St. Mary, she radiated an almost otherworldly purity that seemed to confirm what moviegoers had long believed, that this Swedish beauty was as wholesome off-screen as she appeared on celluloid. Married to dentist Petter Lindstrom since 1937, mother to young daughter Pia, Bergman represented everything Hollywood wanted the world to believe about its stars. What the public didn't know was that Bergman's marriage had become emotionally barren, a partnership that existed more on paper than in any meaningful sense. In 1949, Bergman traveled to Italy to work with director Roberto Rossellini on the film Stromboli. She had initiated the collaboration herself, writing to Rossellini to express her admiration for his neo-realist work. When they met, the connection was immediate and overwhelming. For Bergman, who had spent years performing both on screen and in her personal life, the passion she felt for Rossellini represented something she had never experienced: authentic, consuming love. By the time filming concluded, Bergman was pregnant with Rossellini's child. She was still married to Lindstrom. Rossellini was still married to his wife. And the world was about to discover that their saint had fallen. When news of the pregnancy broke, the American public's reaction was swift and vicious. This wasn't merely disappointment in a favorite star's personal choices. It was rage at what felt like a betrayal of the wholesome image Bergman had represented. Colorado Senator Edwin C. Johnson took to the Senate floor to denounce her as a powerful influence for evil and Hollywood's apostle of degradation. He went so far as to suggest that Bergman should be barred from ever returning to the United States. Churches organized boycotts of her films. The fan letters that had once expressed adoration, sometimes 3,000 per week, now arrived filled with hatred and condemnation. One letter writer called her a disgrace to motherhood. RKO Pictures immediately canceled all of Bergman's existing contracts. Most devastating of all, Lindstrom refused to allow Pia to see her mother, and California courts supported his decision. Bergman, facing the loss of her career, her country, and her daughter, made a choice that stunned observers. She refused to apologize, refused to hide, and refused to pretend the love she felt was shameful. Bergman remained in Italy, where she married Rossellini after both obtained divorces. Together, they had 3 children: Robertino in 1950, and twins Isabella and Isotta in 1952. America's most beloved actress became an exile, unable to work in Hollywood and separated from her eldest daughter for 7 years. Friends remember her struggling with the pain of separation from Pia, but never wavering in her belief that she had made the right choice. She wrote letters to her daughter that Lindstrom refused to deliver. During the exile, she lived in a modest apartment in Rome, far from the Hollywood glamour she had known, surviving on the occasional European film role. The exile lasted until 1956, when director Anatoly Litvak offered Bergman the title role in Anastasia. The film would mark her return to American cinema, and the industry watched carefully to see if audiences would accept her again. When Anastasia was released, critics praised Bergman's performance, and the public response suggested that 7 years had softened the condemnation. At the 1957 Academy Awards, Bergman won her second Oscar for Best Actress. She didn't attend the ceremony. She was performing in a play in Paris. But her win represented a form of forgiveness from the industry that had cast her out. When she finally appeared at the Academy Awards in 1959, the audience rose to give her an ovation that suggested Hollywood had moved past the scandal. Bergman eventually reconciled with Pia, who came to understand that her mother's choice had been genuine. Bergman continued working until shortly before her passing from cancer in 1982. She had lived on her own terms, loved authentically, and ultimately found both professional redemption and personal peace. But what happens when refusing to conform isn't enough? When the studio doesn't just control your image, they claim to own you for as long as they choose? Olivia de Havilland was about to risk something even more dangerous than exile. 3 years of unemployment fighting a legal battle that would free every actor in Hollywood. Olivia de Havilland, the law that changed everything. Olivia de Havilland seemed an unlikely revolutionary. Known for playing gentle, refined characters like Melanie Hamilton in Gone with the Wind, she projected an image of sweet compliance that belied the fierce determination beneath. By 1943, de Havilland had been under contract to Warner Brothers for 7 years. In Hollywood's golden age, studios wielded absolute power over their contract players. 7-year contracts bound performers to a single studio, which controlled everything from their names and appearances to their romantic relationships and political views. Warner Brothers had suspended de Havilland multiple times during those 7 years for refusing roles she considered beneath her abilities. According to the studio's interpretation, those suspension periods didn't count toward her 7 years of service. They wanted to add 6 months of suspension time to her contract, effectively extending her servitude indefinitely. Suspension without pay awaited any star who refused a role, and those suspensions could be added onto contract lengths forever. De Havilland consulted with lawyers who told her something extraordinary. California law limited personal service contracts to 7 calendar years, regardless of whether the employee had worked every single day. The suspension clause that studios had been using for decades to extend contracts might actually be illegal. Armed with this knowledge, de Havilland made a decision that would define her legacy. She filed a lawsuit against Warner Brothers, arguing that after 7 calendar years, her contract was void. The studio's response was predictable and terrifying. They not only refused to release her, but made it clear that if she won, they would ensure no other studio ever hired her. The industry united behind Warner Brothers, understanding that if de Havilland succeeded, the entire system of studio control would collapse. For 3 years, de Havilland did not work. She was in her mid-20s, at the peak of her beauty and talent, watching her career slip away while the case moved through the courts. During this period, she took whatever work she could find outside of films, radio appearances, a stage production, anything to pay her legal bills, which eventually exceeded $10,000 and living expenses. She supported herself through the lawsuit by appearing in a play, but her film career remained frozen. Other actresses might have settled, accepting a compromise that would have allowed them to return to work. De Havilland refused. The principle was too important. Her own sister, Joan Fontaine, publicly questioned whether the battle was worth destroying her career. In 1945, the California Supreme Court ruled in de Havilland's favor. The 7-year limit applied regardless of suspensions. Warner Brothers could not extend her contract beyond 7 calendar years. The decision, which became known as the de Havilland Law, remains in effect today. It applies not just to actors, but to all personal service contracts in California. Every performer who has ever negotiated from a position of strength, every actor who has walked away from a studio to pursue better opportunities, every modern star who controls their own career owes a debt to de Havilland's courage. Within months of her victory, she signed with Paramount Pictures and began choosing roles that showcased her range. She won Academy Awards for To Each His Own in 1946 and The Heiress in 1949, proving that her years of unemployment had not diminished her abilities. De Havilland's victory freed actors from contract slavery. But one star realized you didn't need to fight studios in court. You just needed to refuse to obey their rules about how women should look, speak, and behave. And when they labeled her box office poison, she made them regret every word. Katharine Hepburn, the woman who wore pants. Katharine Hepburn arrived in Hollywood in the early 1930s with ideas that horrified studio executives. She wore pants. She refused to give interviews. She turned down publicity appearances. She wouldn't pretend to be romantically involved with her leading men. For RKO Pictures, which had signed her after her Broadway success, Hepburn represented both a tremendous talent and an ongoing management problem. Stars were supposed to be grateful for studio guidance, eager to please the publicity department, and willing to mold themselves into whatever image would sell tickets. Hepburn did none of these things. The pants issue became particularly contentious. Studio executives insisted that women in pants looked unfeminine and would alienate audiences. When Hepburn showed up to the studio lot in trousers, RKO executives reportedly had wardrobe hide all her dresses to force her to wear a skirt. Hepburn simply went home and worked from there until they returned her clothes. She later claimed she wore pants because they were practical, not because she was making a statement. But her refusal to change when ordered made it a statement regardless. The studio eventually surrendered in the pants battle, realizing they couldn't control her wardrobe any more than they could control her publicity. For several years, her unconventional behavior was tolerated because her films performed well. But by 1938, a series of box office disappointments led the Independent Theater Owners Association to label Hepburn box office poison. The label was devastating. Studios used it as justification to drop contracts, reduce salaries, and force stars into submission. RKO made it clear that Hepburn's days of independence were over. She would either start cooperating with the studio system or find herself unemployed. Hepburn's response was characteristically bold. Rather than beg for better treatment, she bought out her contract from RKO. She then purchased the film rights to The Philadelphia Story, a Broadway play written specifically for her by Philip Barry. She would control the property, choose her director, approve her co-stars, and sell the package to whatever studio met her terms. It was an audacious move, particularly for a woman who had just been labeled box office poison. Hepburn was betting that she understood her own value better than the studios did. The Philadelphia Story opened in 1940 to both critical and commercial success. The film became the second highest-grossing picture of the year, earning over $2 million, an enormous sum during that era. Audiences who had supposedly tired of Hepburn flocked to see her in a role that played to her strengths while gently mocking her own upper-class eccentricities. The film earned 6 Academy Award nominations and proved definitively that the box office poison label had been wrong. Hepburn had shown that an actress could become her own producer, control her own material, and succeed entirely on her own terms. For the next 5 decades, Hepburn continued to wear pants when she felt like it, avoided publicity when it suited her, and chose only roles that interested her. She won an unprecedented 4 Academy Awards for Best Actress. Colleagues remember a professional of intimidating standards and absolute integrity, proving that a woman could age in Hollywood, maintain her independence, and thrive for an entire career. Hepburn refused to change how she dressed. Another star faced something far more insidious. Studio executives who looked at her American face and decided to erase her identity entirely, forcing her to play racial stereotypes that had nothing to do with who she was. Myrna Loy, refusing to play the stereotype. Myrna Loy was born Myrna Williams in Montana in 1905, descended from Welsh settlers with no connection whatsoever to Asia. But when she arrived in Hollywood in the 1920s, studio executives looked at her slightly exotic features and decided she should play Oriental villainesses. For nearly a decade, Loy found herself cast as mysterious, dangerous women from vague Asian countries, often committing cinematic crimes in heavy makeup designed to make her look more foreign. The roles were demeaning, culturally insensitive, and had nothing to do with Loy's actual heritage or abilities. They were also steady work in an industry where unemployment was constant. By the early 1930s, Loy had appeared in dozens of films, almost always playing some variation of the exotic temptress or villain. She watched other actresses get the sophisticated American roles she knew she could play, while casting directors continued to see her only as a source of manufactured Oriental mystery. The typecasting had become so established that some casting directors actually believed Loy was Asian. In 1932, Loy was offered the lead in The Mask of Fu Manchu. 6 weeks of work at $5,000, enough to cover her rent for a year. She read the script, saw her character described as the sadistic Oriental daughter, and turned it down flat. Her bank account had $200. She walked away anyway. Loy began refusing every role that featured her as an exotic other, even when unemployment meant genuine financial hardship. She lobbied directors and producers she respected, making the case that she could play American women as well as anyone in Hollywood. The gamble paid off in 1934, when director W.S. Van Dyke cast her opposite William Powell in The Thin Man. Playing the sophisticated, witty, thoroughly American Nora Charles, Loy was a revelation. Audiences discovered that she had an extraordinary gift for comedy and could project intelligence and charm with equal ease. The Thin Man made Loy a star on her own terms. She and Powell became one of Hollywood's most popular screen couples, appearing together in 14 films. Throughout the 1930s and 40s, she became known as the perfect wife of American cinema, playing roles that showed American women as intelligent, capable partners rather than exotic objects. During the McCarthy era of the 1950s, when many Hollywood figures were being blacklisted for alleged communist sympathies, Loy quietly refused to work on any production that employed blacklisted individuals under false names or that participated in the anti-communist hysteria. She sacrificed film opportunities rather than participate in the destruction of colleagues' careers. Loy had to fight for years to reclaim her stolen identity. But another actress faced something even darker. A studio executive who didn't just want to control her image. He wanted to own her completely. Rita Hayworth, escaping the man who owned her. Rita Hayworth's transformation from Margarita Carmen Canzino to Rita Hayworth had been orchestrated entirely by Columbia Pictures executive Harry Cohn. He changed her name, dyed her naturally dark hair auburn, painfully altered her hairline through electrolysis, and created the image of the American love goddess that made her one of the most famous women in the world. But Cohn's involvement in Hayworth's life went far beyond normal studio management. He became obsessed with her, controlling every aspect of her career and personal life with an intensity that crossed from professional into pathological. Cohn determined which roles Hayworth would play, which men she could date, and how she would present herself publicly. He had a direct phone line installed from his office to her dressing room and would call multiple times a day to check on her whereabouts. Studio employees later reported that Cohn would become enraged if Hayworth didn't answer immediately. When she married director Edward Judson in 1937, Cohn's jealousy was palpable. After that marriage ended, Cohn's control intensified. He loaned her out to other studios as punishment when she displeased him, forced her into roles that exploited her physical beauty while giving her little room to demonstrate her considerable dancing talent, and made it clear that he considered her Columbia Pictures property. The situation became truly disturbing when Hayworth began her relationship with Orson Welles in 1943. Welles recognized Hayworth's intelligence and yearned to help her develop as an actress. He cast her in The Lady from Shanghai, giving her a short platinum blonde haircut that symbolized a break from the Gilda image Cohn had so carefully crafted. Cohn was furious. He had The Lady from Shanghai edited into near incoherence, effectively sabotaging the film. More ominously, he made it clear that her marriage to Welles would not free her from Columbia. The studio owned her contract, and Cohn considered that contract a form of personal possession. Hayworth's breaking point came gradually. Her marriage to Welles ended in 1947, partly due to the pressures Cohn created. But instead of returning to his control, Hayworth began seeking ways to escape. In 1948, she negotiated an independent production deal that would allow her to make films outside of Columbia's direct control. Cohn fought the arrangement viciously, but Hayworth was determined. Her marriage to Prince Ali Khan in 1949 represented another form of escape, leaving Hollywood entirely for a relationship that promised freedom from Cohn's reach. The marriage to Ali Khan didn't last, and Hayworth eventually returned to Hollywood and to Columbia Pictures. But something had fundamentally changed. She no longer allowed Cohn to dictate her personal choices. She accepted roles on her own terms and walked away when the terms were unacceptable. Colleagues recall that Hayworth remained scarred by the years of control, but they also remember a woman who had found the courage to say enough, who recognized that the man who claimed to have created her actually wanted to own her. When Cohn passed away in 1958, some Hollywood insiders noted that Hayworth seemed visibly relieved. Hayworth escaped one man's obsessive control. But how did one actress take on an entire studio and somehow win? Even after she lost in court. Bette Davis. The lawsuit heard round Hollywood. Bette Davis, in 1936, was Warner Brothers' most valuable asset. She had won an Academy Award for Dangerous in 1935, and audiences adored her intense, intelligent performances. But Davis found herself increasingly frustrated by the roles the studio forced upon her. Warner Brothers operated on an assembly line model, churning out films quickly and cheaply, often with little regard for quality. As a contract player, Davis had no right to refuse roles. The studio could assign her to any project they chose, and if she refused, they could suspend her without pay and add that suspension time to her contract. When Warner Brothers offered to loan her to Samuel Goldwyn for the role of Jezebel, a part Davis desperately wanted, the studio demanded she first complete several mediocre films they had lined up. Davis looked at the string of inferior projects and made a decision that shocked the industry. She sailed to England, where she had been offered a role in a British production. She would work there, beyond Warner Brothers' reach, and force the studio to either release her from her contract or accept that their most valuable star was no longer willing to be treated as property. Warner Brothers' response was swift and devastating. They sued Davis in British court for breach of contract, demanding she return to Hollywood immediately or be barred from working anywhere in the world. The case became a sensation. Here was one of Hollywood's brightest stars publicly challenging the studio system's absolute power. The trial revealed the full extent of studio control, the 7-year contracts, the suspension clauses, the complete authority over every aspect of an actor's professional life. Warner Brothers lawyers argued that Davis had a moral obligation to honor her commitments, while Davis's team countered that the contract amounted to involuntary servitude. Davis lost the case. The British court ruled that she must honor her contract with Warner Brothers. The legal defeat cost her dearly in legal fees and appeared to confirm the studio's absolute authority. But something unexpected happened when Davis returned to Hollywood. Warner Brothers, which had every right to punish her with suspension and terrible roles, instead began offering her better material. The studio executives had been shaken by the publicity surrounding the trial, by the clear evidence that their biggest star was unhappy enough to risk everything. They began consulting with Davis on her roles, giving her input she had never had before. Within 2 years, she starred in Jezebel, winning her second Academy Award. Davis's lawsuit failed in court, but succeeded in changing the relationship between stars and studios. It demonstrated that even the most powerful companies were vulnerable to public opinion and star power. Davis fought publicly in the courts. Another actress waged a quieter war. One fought not with lawsuits, but with the simple refusal to work for less than she believed she was worth. Claudette Colbert, the negotiator who beat the system. Claudette Colbert understood something about Hollywood that many of her contemporaries missed. The studios only had as much power as stars gave them. In the early 1930s, Colbert was an established performer, but not yet a major star. She recognized that the moment to negotiate was before she became indispensable. She began making demands that shocked Paramount Pictures executives. She wanted approval over her scripts. She insisted on consulting her directors. Most audaciously, she demanded to be the highest-paid actress in Hollywood. Paramount's response was to offer her standard terms and expect gratitude. Colbert refused to sign. She was willing to walk away from a major studio contract rather than accept less than she believed she was worth. This was extraordinary. The Great Depression was at its height, and steady employment was precious. Actresses were generally expected to be more compliant than actors. And Colbert wasn't yet a major star. She was betting that her talent would make her valuable enough to command her price. The gamble worked brilliantly. When Columbia Pictures offered her the lead in It Happened One Night, she refused unless they met her salary demands. They needed her more than she needed them, and they paid. When the film opened in 1934, Colbert won the Academy Award for Best Actress. Suddenly, every studio wanted her, and Colbert leveraged that desirability into extraordinary contract terms. By 1938, she was indeed the highest-paid star in Hollywood, earning $150,000 per film. She had secured approval rights over her scripts, directors, and even her cinematographers. Unheard of control for an actress of her era. Her contract even included a clause specifying that she would only be filmed from her left side, which she considered her better angle, and studios complied. Colbert never positioned herself as fighting the studios. Instead, she presented her demands as simple business negotiations. She was offering a valuable commodity, her talent and star power, and she expected to be compensated appropriately. Colbert's other brilliant strategy was knowing when to walk away. When she believed she had gotten the best work from Hollywood, she retired from films in the 1960s and focused on stage work. She left on her own terms, financially secure from decades of commanding top dollar. While Colbert negotiated from a position of business savvy, another star faced an impossible choice that no amount of money or negotiation could solve. She could work if she accepted roles designed to degrade her, or she could maintain her dignity and face financial ruin. Dorothy Dandridge, the barrier breaker who refused servitude. Dorothy Dandridge possessed extraordinary beauty and remarkable talent. She could sing, dance, and act with a sophistication that matched any Hollywood star, but she was black. And in the 1940s and 50s, that meant Hollywood saw her as suitable only for demeaning, stereotypical roles. Studios wanted maids and mammies, characters who existed solely to serve white protagonists. Dandridge could have accepted the limited roles available to black actresses and built a career playing servants. Many talented performers did exactly that, finding what work they could in an industry that systematically excluded them from meaningful parts. But Dandridge refused. She turned down roles that degraded her, even when those refusals meant months or years without income. She held out for parts that allowed her to display her full range as a performer, to play characters with agency, complexity, and dignity. In 1954, director Otto Preminger cast Dandridge as the title character in Carmen Jones, an all-black adaptation of Bizet's opera Carmen. Her performance was extraordinary. She brought a fierce sensuality and vulnerability to the role that electrified audiences. When she sang on screen, even though her voice was dubbed by opera singer Marilyn Horne, her physical performance was so powerful that audiences believed every note came from her. Her work earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress. She became the first black actress ever nominated in that category. The nomination should have opened doors. Instead, Hollywood's response was silence. When Carmen Jones earned her that historic Oscar nomination, Dorothy waited for the phone to ring. It didn't. For 6 months, she received exactly 0 offers from major studios. The same executives who congratulated her at the ceremony wouldn't return her agent's calls. They'd rather leave an Oscar-nominated actress unemployed than imagine her opposite a white leading man. Despite her historic Oscar nomination, Dandridge found herself unemployed for long stretches. She appeared in a few more films, including Preminger's Porgy and Bess in 1959, but substantial roles remained scarce. The years of unemployment devastated her financially, particularly as she struggled to pay for constant care for her daughter Harolyn, who had been born with severe brain damage requiring lifelong institutional care. The care costs exceeded $2,000 per month, an astronomical sum in the 1950s. Dandridge's response revealed her character. She could have returned to the limited roles she had refused earlier. She chose dignity over survival. She continued to refuse degrading work, even as her financial situation became desperate. She understood that every time she played a demeaning role, she reinforced Hollywood's limited imagination about what black women could be. The toll of this choice was devastating. Dandridge struggled with depression, financial ruin, and the constant stress of providing for her daughter's medical care. On September 8, 1965, she was found unresponsive in her West Hollywood apartment at age 42 from an accidental medication overdose. She had been planning a comeback, but the years of fighting an industry that refused to see her as fully human had exhausted her. Dorothy Dandridge chose dignity over survival, and it cost her everything. If stories like this prove why classic Hollywood needs to be remembered honestly, subscribe to Golden Age Files. These aren't just stories. They're the truth behind the glamour. New videos every week. When Halle Berry became the first black woman to win the Academy Award for Best Actress in 2002, she invoked Dandridge's memory, acknowledging the door Dandridge had opened through her refusal to accept anything less than equal treatment. Dandridge fought barriers created by others. But what if Hollywood told you that you couldn't do something not because of your race or gender, but simply because it was impossible? One star heard that women couldn't direct and decided to prove them wrong. Ida Lupino, mother on the set. Ida Lupino had been acting since the 1930s, playing a variety of roles that showcased her dramatic abilities. But by the 1940s, she was frustrated by the limited parts available to women. She watched directors make creative decisions she disagreed with, saw stories she wanted to tell being ignored because male executives couldn't imagine them having commercial appeal. When Lupino decided to become a director, the response from Hollywood was dismissive at best. Women didn't direct. That was simply understood. There had been a handful of female directors in silent films, but by the 1940s, directing was considered an entirely male profession. The technical knowledge, the ability to command a crew, the creative vision required, all of this was assumed to be beyond women's capabilities. Rather than demanding to be called a director, Lupino referred to herself as mother on set. The term was less threatening to male executives and crew members, suggesting a nurturing role rather than an authoritative one. But Lupino ran her sets with absolute control. She knew every technical aspect of filmmaking, having spent years watching and learning. Lupino would arrive on set at 5 in the morning, 2 hours before anyone else, to walk through every camera angle, plan every shot, and leave detailed notes for her cinematographer. By the time the crew arrived, she could describe exactly what she wanted in technical terms that even the most skeptical cameraman had to respect. One cinematographer later admitted he'd arrived expecting to humor a difficult actress and left having learned new techniques. Lupino didn't just direct any films. She deliberately chose controversial subjects that male directors avoided. Her film Outrage in 1950, it was one of the first to seriously address violence against women, treating the victim with dignity and focusing on her psychological recovery rather than sensationalizing the crime. Not Wanted in 1949 dealt with unwed motherhood without moralizing. The Bigamist in 1953 examined a man leading a double life with 2 families, treating all the characters as complex human beings rather than moral examples. Unable to get studio backing initially, she formed her own production company with her then-husband Collier Young. They made low-budget films that tackled subjects studios wouldn't touch, sold them to distributors, and built Lupino's reputation one independent film at a time. Eventually, major studios began hiring her to direct television episodes, and she became one of the most prolific television directors of the 1950s and 60s, working on everything from The Twilight Zone to The Fugitive. Lupino proved that women could direct anything: features, television, action, drama, whatever the material required. Lupino created opportunities within the system by proving herself undeniable. But one star looked at the entire studio system and said, "Why should I work for you when I can own the company myself?" Mary Pickford, America's sweetheart, Hollywood's first mogul. Mary Pickford in 1919 was the most famous woman in the world. As America's sweetheart, she had spent over a decade playing innocent young girls and plucky heroines, becoming so beloved that audiences felt they personally knew her. But Pickford had become increasingly frustrated by the studio system. She was the biggest box office draw in Hollywood, yet studios took the majority of the profits from her films. She had limited control over her scripts, directors, and working conditions. Pickford's solution was radical and unprecedented. Along with Charlie Chaplin, Douglas Fairbanks, and director D.W. Griffith, founded United Artists in 19... The company would distribute films made by its founding partners, allowing them to retain creative control and the majority of profits. Studios could no longer force them into projects, dictate their schedules, or control their personal lives. The established studios were horrified. An executive at Metro Pictures reportedly said the inmates have taken over the asylum. How could mere actors possibly run a distribution company? The conventional wisdom held that actors were talented, not business people. In United Artists' first year, the company struggled financially. Studio executives placed bets on how long before the inmates came crawling back. Pickford watched expenses mount, her partners disagreeing on strategy, and wondered if she had destroyed everything she'd built. Then her first United Artists film, Pollyanna, opened to enormous success, and the doubters went quiet. United Artists became enormously successful. Pickford's own films through the company made her a multimillionaire, earning her not just salary but actual ownership stake in highly profitable productions. She controlled every creative aspect of her work. She chose her stories, approved her directors, and made films that reflected her artistic vision. Pickford's business acumen extended far beyond acting and producing. She became a shrewd negotiator, an expert on copyright law, and a savvy investor who understood film finance as well as any studio executive. During the early years of United Artists, she was often the driving force behind major business decisions. In one legendary meeting with theater owners who were trying to negotiate lower distribution fees, Pickford arrived with detailed financial projections that proved United Artists deserved higher rates. When people suggested that her husband Douglas Fairbanks or partner Charlie Chaplin must be running things, Pickford would smile sweetly and then demonstrate her complete command of every detail of United Artists' operations. The star who had built her career playing innocent girls was actually one of the toughest business minds in Hollywood. She understood that the childlike persona she presented on screen was valuable precisely because it was a performance. Which act of defiance has surprised you most so far? Let us know in the comments below. And tell us, what other Golden Age Hollywood topics should we explore next? Pickford built a business empire, but one star was about to sacrifice something far more precious than money or career. She would risk her family's safety to stand against the greatest evil of the 20th century. Marlene Dietrich, the star who said no to Hitler. Marlene Dietrich in 1930 was one of Germany's greatest stars. Her performance in The Blue Angel had made her an international sensation. And when she moved to Hollywood, she brought with her a sophistication and glamour that American audiences found irresistible. But as the 1930s progressed and Adolf Hitler's Nazi regime consolidated power in Germany, Dietrich faced a choice that would define her life. The Nazis wanted her back. Hitler personally invited her to return to Germany, promising unlimited resources and positioning as the Third Reich's greatest cultural ambassador. Dietrich could have been wealthy beyond measure, could have been treated as national royalty, could have reunited with her family and lived in the country of her birth. She absolutely refused. Dietrich's rejection of the Nazi regime wasn't a quiet, private matter. She became an American citizen in 1939, formally renouncing her German nationality. She began openly criticizing the Nazi government, using her fame to draw attention to Hitler's policies. Most importantly, during World War II, she volunteered to entertain Allied troops, traveling to the front lines and performing for soldiers fighting against her homeland. The personal cost was staggering. Dietrich's mother and sister remained in Germany, and their safety became increasingly precarious as Dietrich's anti-Nazi activities intensified. The regime could have arrested them at any time as leverage or punishment. In 1944, Dietrich learned the Nazis had added her name to a list of traitors to face severe consequences immediately if Germany won the war. She kept performing for Allied troops anyway. Every time she stepped on stage near the front lines, she knew that if the battle turned, she wouldn't be taken prisoner. She wouldn't survive capture. After the war, she discovered that her sister had been imprisoned briefly, though she survived. The guilt and relief Dietrich experienced created wounds that never fully healed. Dietrich's work entertaining troops wasn't the kind of safe stage performances that some celebrities delivered far from danger. She traveled to the front lines in North Africa, Italy, and eventually France. She performed in makeshift venues, sometimes under enemy fire, singing the songs soldiers requested and boosting morale during the darkest days of the war. Soldiers later recalled her performing in freezing conditions, wearing a sequined gown while standing on a makeshift stage constructed from ammunition crates. Her breath visible in the cold air as she sang Lily Marlene. She would sleep in military tents, eat K-rations, and travel in military vehicles alongside the troops. The military awarded her the Medal of Freedom, America's highest civilian honor. Yet when she returned to Germany after the war, many Germans treated her with coldness or outright hostility. She had chosen principle over patriotism, humanity over nationalism. This wasn't a single moment of bravery, but years of maintaining a position that endangered her family and required her to actively work against the country where she had been born. She could have remained neutral, claimed that politics wasn't her concern, focused on her Hollywood career. Instead, she risked everything, lost much, and never wavered. If Dietrich stood against evil on the world stage, another star waged a more personal rebellion, refusing to pretend to be anything other than exactly who she was. And somehow, her talent was so undeniable that Hollywood had to accept her anyway. Tallulah Bankhead. the star who lived out loud. Tallulah Bankhead arrived in Hollywood in the 1930s, with a reputation that preceded her. The Alabama-born actress was known for her devastating wit, her distinctive voice, and her absolute refusal to pretend to be anything other than exactly who she was. Studios took one look at Bankhead and saw enormous potential. She was beautiful, talented, and possessed a commanding presence. They also saw a management nightmare. Bankhead drank openly when drinking was considered unladylike. She spoke with profane eloquence that would have shocked most actresses of her era. She had affairs with both men and women at a time when homosexuality wasn't just socially unacceptable, but actually illegal in most places. She missed rehearsals, showed up late to sets, and treated the morality clauses in her contracts as suggestions rather than rules. When a reporter once asked her about her private life, she famously replied, "Darling, there's nothing private about it." By every measure of conventional Hollywood behavior, Bankhead should have been fired, blacklisted, and forgotten. Instead, she became a legend. The reason Bankhead survived behaviors that would have destroyed other careers was simple. She was too talented to ignore. When she performed, whether on stage or screen, she commanded complete attention. Directors who swore they would never work with her again found themselves begging for one more collaboration. Bankhead's most outrageous quality wasn't any specific behavior, but her complete lack of shame about who she was. When gossip columnists tried to scandalize her with rumors of affairs, she would confirm them cheerfully and add details. When morality crusaders condemned her lifestyle, she would thank them for the publicity. She refused to allow anyone to make her feel diminished or apologetic for living authentically. Hollywood eventually gave up trying to control Bankhead and instead accepted her as she was. She left films in the late 1930s and returned to Broadway, where she became even more successful. Her performance as Regina Giddens in The Little Foxes in 1939 was acclaimed as one of the great theatrical achievements of the era. When she passed away in 1968, the tributes focused not just on her artistic achievements, but on her courage in living openly and honestly in an era when such honesty could have destroyed her. Think about what we've seen so far. Legal battles, moral courage, business revolutions. But one actress took the most fundamental stand of all. She simply refused to let anyone control her. Not studios, not husbands, not societal expectations. For 50 years, she answered to absolutely no one. Barbara Stanwyck, the star who answered to no one. Barbara Stanwyck was born Ruby Stevens in Brooklyn in 1907, orphaned at age 4, and raised by her older sister. She learned early that survival meant depending on no one but herself. Unlike many stars who allowed studios to manage their finances, Stanwyck kept absolute control over her money. Unlike actresses who relied on powerful men to advance their careers, Stanwyck negotiated her own contracts and made her own professional decisions. When Stanwyck's first marriage to Frank Fay ended in 1935 after years of his alcoholism and reported physical abuse, she made a choice that was unusual for her era. She never seriously considered marrying again. She had one more brief marriage to Robert Taylor that ended in 1952. But colleagues report that Stanwyck preferred being unmarried. She enjoyed her independence, her ability to make choices without consulting anyone, and her complete financial autonomy. Stanwyck demanded approval rights over her scripts, turning down roles that portrayed women as helpless or foolish. She insisted on being involved in the development of her characters, often working with writers to strengthen roles that had been underwritten. On set, she was known as a consummate professional who arrived prepared, knew everyone's lines, and helped younger actors with their performances. Directors would later recall that Stanwyck never needed more than 1 or 2 takes. She knew her characters so thoroughly that she delivered perfection immediately. When younger actors struggled with a scene, she would quietly offer suggestions between takes, never undermining them publicly, but always helping them improve. In 1944, when Double Indemnity director Billy Wilder needed someone who could play a calculating conspirator without losing audience sympathy, every other actress in Hollywood turned the role down. Stanwyck read the script and said yes within 24 hours, but only after negotiating approval rights over her costumes and blocking. The role became one of cinema's greatest performances, and Stanwyck collected a percentage of profits that made her wealthier than most studio executives. She often played working-class women who used intelligence and determination to survive difficult circumstances. Her characters in films like Stella Dallas, The Lady Eve, and Double Indemnity were complex, flawed, and absolutely compelling. By the time Stanwyck retired in the late 1980s, she had worked for over 50 years on her own terms. She owned her own home, controlled her own investments, and had built a career entirely according to her own vision. Stanwyck maintained her independence through sheer force of will, But one star proved that the fight for dignity wasn't just a woman's battle. Male stars faced the same studio tyranny. James Cagney, the man who fought Warner Brothers and won. James Cagney, in the early 1930s, was Warner Brothers' greatest male star, known for his explosive energy and his ability to convey both menace and vulnerability. But Cagney faced the same contract issues that trapped female stars: 7-year contracts, suspension clauses, studio control over every aspect of his career. By the mid-1930s, Cagney's frustration with Warner Brothers had reached a breaking point. The studio was loaning him out to other companies while paying him a fraction of what they collected for his services. They were forcing him into repetitive gangster roles when he wanted to show his range. When Cagney consulted with lawyers, they told him what Bette Davis had already discovered: the studio system's contracts might be legally questionable. Cagney's lawsuit against Warner Brothers came at approximately the same time as Davis's battle, and the two cases reinforced each other. Here was Warner Brothers' biggest male star and their most valuable actress, both publicly challenging the studio's absolute authority. Cagney's case settled out of court, with Warner Brothers offering substantially better terms rather than risk losing. Cagney won approval rights over his scripts, better compensation, and the guarantee that his 7-year contract meant 7 actual years. More importantly, he earned the right to form his own production company, allowing him to make films outside of Warner Brothers' control. His production company went on to produce some of his most acclaimed work, including the patriotic musical Yankee Doodle Dandy, for which he won his only Academy Award. The success of Cagney's lawsuit, combined with Davis's public battle and de Havilland's eventual legal victory, fundamentally changed how studios approached contract negotiations. The suspension clause that had been used to extend contracts indefinitely became legally questionable. The absolute studio control that had defined Hollywood's golden age began to erode, replaced by a system where stars had genuine negotiating power. Cagney's willingness to fight alongside actresses like Davis demonstrated that the battle for actors' rights wasn't about gender, but about fundamental human dignity. Now, by this point, you might be thinking, why don't modern actors create their own studios like Pickford did? Why don't they fight studios in court like de Havilland? Actually, they do. When George Clooney sells his production company, when Reese Witherspoon runs her media empire, when Taylor Swift re-records her albums to own her masters, they're walking paths these 15 rebels built. We've seen 14 acts of defiance. Our final rebel did something that still divides opinion. She walked away from certain legendary status for love. Was it defiance? Was it surrender? Or was it the ultimate act of choosing happiness over fame? Grace Kelly, walking away from certain stardom. Grace Kelly in 1956 was the fastest rising star in Hollywood. She had appeared in 3 Alfred Hitchcock films: Dial M for Murder, Rear Window, and To Catch a Thief. Becoming the director's ideal blonde, cool, elegant, and hiding depths beneath a perfect surface. She had won an Academy Award for The Country Girl in 1955. At 26 years old, she was beautiful, talented, and on a clear trajectory to become one of Hollywood's all-time greats. Then Grace Kelly met Prince Rainier III of Monaco during the Cannes Film Festival in 1955. The meeting was arranged as a publicity opportunity, a photo session between Hollywood royalty and actual royalty. But something unexpected happened. Kelly and Rainier fell in love. What began as a carefully orchestrated photo opportunity became a genuine relationship. The engagement was announced in January 1956, and suddenly, Hollywood faced losing its brightest young star. MGM was furious. The studio had invested heavily in Kelly's career, expecting decades of profitable films. Her contract still had years remaining. When Kelly informed them she would be retiring from acting after her marriage, MGM executives attempted to enforce the contract. Kelly refused. She would honor her existing commitments, completing filming on High Society. But after her marriage in April 1956, she would not be returning to Hollywood. The studio threatened legal action, public relations campaigns, anything to keep their investment from walking away. Kelly remained unmoved. By all accounts, Kelly loved performing, loved working with talented directors, and had ambitions to play more challenging roles as she matured. But she had fallen in love with Rainier, and being Princess of Monaco meant retiring from professional acting. The Monaco Constitution and the Principality's government made it explicitly clear that a working actress would not be an acceptable princess. Royal protocol demanded full-time dedication to state duties. So Grace Kelly walked away from guaranteed legendary status. She made her final Hollywood film appearance in High Society. The marriage itself was an international event, broadcast to 30 million viewers worldwide. The wedding dress alone, designed by MGM's Helen Rose, became one of the most copied designs in fashion history. And then Kelly was gone from Hollywood. settling into life as Princess Grace of Monaco. The years that followed revealed both the costs and rewards of her choice. Kelly took her royal duties seriously, working on charitable causes and representing Monaco with the same grace she had brought to her acting. She raised 3 children and remained married to Rainier until her passing in an automobile accident in 1982. But there were also moments of deep regret. 20 years after retiring, Grace Kelly watched an actress her own age win an Oscar. A colleague later recalled finding her in her Monaco palace, script pages scattered around her. The role Hitchcock had begged her to take for Marnie. The Monaco government had refused permission. "I could have done it better," she whispered. The fairy tale had become a cage after all. Those who knew her in her later years report that Kelly sometimes wondered what her film career might have become, but she never expressed regret about the choice itself. She had walked away on her own terms, refusing to allow a studio contract or professional ambition to determine her personal happiness. If these stories of courage and defiance moved you, please like this video and share it with someone who loves classic Hollywood as much as you do. In 2002, Halle Berry stood on the Oscar stage, holding the Best Actress award that had eluded Dorothy Dandridge 48 years earlier. She looked at the camera and said, "This moment is for Dorothy Dandridge, Lena Horne, Diane Carroll. It's for the women who stood beside me and the women who came before me." That's the legacy these 15 rebels created. Not in the roles they played or the awards they won, but in making it possible for every actor who came after them to stand on stage and thank those who fought so they wouldn't have to. Grace Kelly walked away from Hollywood. Katharine Hepburn wore pants when pants were rebellious. Olivia de Havilland spent 3 years unemployed fighting for a law that still protects you today. Marlene Dietrich risked her family's lives to stand against Hitler. They weren't just making careers, they were making freedom possible. These 15 stars changed Hollywood through 15 different forms of rebellion. Some fought legal battles that created laws still in effect today. Others defied moral conventions and lived authentically despite enormous pressure to conform. Some sacrificed careers for principle. Others built business empires that dismantled studio monopolies. They shared one crucial quality: the refusal to be owned, controlled, or diminished by a system designed to manufacture and exploit them. The costs of their defiance were real and sometimes devastating. Ingrid Bergman lost 7 years with her daughter. Dorothy Dandridge left us far too soon. Marlene Dietrich's family suffered, but the choices were always theirs, and that ownership of their own lives was worth whatever price they paid. Every modern actor who negotiates creative control owes a debt to Mary Pickford and United Artists. Every performer protected by the 7-year contract limit should remember Olivia de Havilland's 3-year sacrifice. Women directors building careers today walk through doors Ida Lupino forced open. The Freedom contemporary stars have to live authentically, to speak politically, to choose their own projects. All of this exists because 15 rebels looked at Hollywood's golden age of absolute studio control and said no. They proved that even when studios held absolute power, the human spirit couldn't be bought or controlled. They showed that real power came not from compliance, but from the courage to risk everything for the simple right to be yourself. Their careers became legendary, not despite their defiance, but because of it. Subscribe to Golden Age Files to discover more untold stories of the stars who built Hollywood by refusing to let it break them. Every week, we uncover the truth behind the carefully constructed images. Leave a comment telling us which rebel's story moved you most, and what other classic Hollywood secrets we should reveal next. Till next time, remember, the stars you think you know were braver than you ever imagined. Thank you for watching.